Here's what's coming up on episode 84 of the Big Seance podcast. Uri Geller.
In 1952, that I was eating soup in our tiny little apartment in Tel Aviv, and a spoon bent in my hand, and it actually broke in half. So that's when it all began.
We had already scheduled this interview, and suddenly news broke that the CIA just released 13 million pages of declassified documents, including records covering the testing that you were involved in 1973, I believe. It was known as the Stargate Project.
And the scientists turned to me and said, look, we're going to go out for lunch. We'll close the door. By the time we come back, we want to see the pig dead. So for me, working as a spy was intriguing. I loved it. The skeptics were my cover. Also, at one stage, I did something for the FBI. There was a serial killer in New York called David Berkowitz. He called himself the son of Sam, and I actually found him. And I said, James, Randy, why aren't you shaking my hand? And he kind of looked around over his shoulders, and he said to me with these words, if I remember them correctly, he says, because I hate your guts. When I finished my show, one of the ushers comes up to me and she says, Mr. Geller, did you know that Michael Jackson was sitting right there? And I said, what? Do you mean the Michael Jackson?
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Uri Geller was born in Israel on December 20th, 1946. He's one of the world's most investigated and celebrated mystifiers. Famous around the globe for his mind-bending abilities, including spoon-bending, he's led a unique life shrouded in debate, controversy, and mystery. He first became aware of his unusual powers when he was 5. One day, during a meal, his spoon curled up in his hand and broke, although he had applied no physical pressure to it. In 1969, he began to demonstrate his powers of telepathy and psychokinesis to small audiences. By the end of 1971, he was a household name throughout Israel thanks to his numerous stage appearances. And then, world governments and leaders began calling. He was involved in countless experiments, putting his psychic abilities to the test, and that included remote viewing. And of course, you don't go far into any research about Geller without finding the opinions of professional skeptic James Randi. Uri Geller is mentioned in at least 1,250 different books, and there are now many documentaries out about him, as well as movies that he has inspired. Well, about a month ago, I was fortunate enough to be put in touch with Uri Geller. I have previous guest Teresa Chung to thank for that. I sat on the possibility of an interview for a couple of weeks. I dragged my feet, mainly because the thought of interviewing Uri was very intimidating, and I wasn't sure I would be able to do it. And I also really wanted to make sure that I resonated with his story before I asked. Well, I did decide to ask him, and it turns out my intuition to drag my feet paid off, because just 2 days after we scheduled the interview, and just a few days ago, something very cool happened. Oh, the timing. The CIA had just released 13 million pages of newly declassified documents, including reports covering the government experiments that Uri was involved in what was called the Stargate Project in 1973. So you can imagine how excited I've been to have this conversation. As he told me in the interview you're about to hear, the documents that were just released are only the tip of the iceberg. He also told me that this was his first interview since this news came out, so no pressure, right? My international phone call to Israel was recorded on January 21st, 2017. After the interview, stick around for a brand new Spectral edition from Tim Prasil and a little bit of listener feedback. So here we go. Pour the tea.
Hello.
Mr. Geller, this is Patrick Keller. How are you?
Yes, fantastic, Patrick. Do call me Uri, no mister. And let's get on with it.
I can't believe that I'm sitting here in the big seance parlor with the Uri Geller.
Patrick, no problem. Thanks very much for inviting me on your show. You sounded like a real nice guy, so why not? If I can help anyone, I do that. And also, you must be activating the law of attraction. You probably visualized it. You wanted Uri Geller, and you got it.
I'm telling you, I'll be honest, I've been super nervous today and so excited.
Relax,
so thanks for calming me.
Of course. Just pretend that you're talking to a friend, and again, you may ask me whatever you wish, and let's see what I can answer.
You are amazing. Thank you. I'm not sure it would be possible for me to count the number of books that I've read where the name Uri Geller pops up, referring to you as the great spoonbender. And in my research in the last week leading up to this interview, I realized that there is so much more to your life and your legacy than bending spoons. Does the nickname ever bother you?
Of course not, because you see, Patrick, no matter how trivial the spoon bending sounds, that's what made Uri Geller. But you also have to realize that for 6,000 years, nobody bent metal. So I came along and I originated spoon bending. I created it. And even today, I look back and smile because I myself cannot believe how I managed to instill it into world culture. I know I'm going to drop a few names now and show off a little, but look at movies like The Matrix with Keanu Reeves, learning how to bend a spoon by child. George Clooney played me in a movie. Robert De Niro played me in a movie. There are tons of singers singing about spoon bending, from Incubus to REM to Johnny Cash. So I say, wow, how did I do that? And really, that's the phenomenon, not the spoon bending itself.
So why spoons? How did that get started?
Well, it all started here in Israel. I'm actually speaking to you from my little apartment in Old Jaffa, which is a magical place, and please do Google it. And if you will allow me, I'm going to plug my website right up front. It's urigeller.com. And I'm sure we'll get into the CIA stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You'll find some quite incredibly hard-to-believe films, documentaries about me, especially the one that the BBC produced called The Secret Life of Uri Geller, which was directed by an Oscar-winning director. And not far from where I'm sitting in, I think it was probably 1951, 1952, that I was eating soup in our tiny little apartment in Tel Aviv, and a spoon bent in my hand, and it actually broke in half. So that's when it all began. That's when I got the idea that this is going to make me rich and famous. And the only reason I say rich and famous is because we were so poor that I wanted to stop my mother from working. I wanted to buy her a radio. I wanted to get her a nice dress. And that's how it all began. But, and here comes a fantastical story, before the spoon bending, something very odd, very bizarre, very different, and very unusual happened to me in an Arabic garden across our apartment building, which was in Bezalel Yaffe 13. That's the name of the street. It was on the corner of Rothschild Boulevard. I was playing in this garden. I heard kittens cry, and as a little boy, I wanted to find them. And suddenly, out of nowhere, and this is absolutely true, and again, it will sound to you like it's taken out of a science fiction film, but I saw this huge sphere of light. It was strobing. The next thing I can remember, there was a laser beam type of a beam that emanated out of it, hit my forehead. It was so strong that it pushed me into the grass. I don't know how long I lay there, but when I ran home to tell my mother, she just didn't believe me. Although we are related to Sigmund Freud, my name is actually Uri Geller, Freud from, related to the great psychologist from Vienna. She thought that I was either dreaming, I dreamt it, I made it up, and so on. But I want to jump now a few decades forward. I never shone away from this story. I always stuck to it. And I spoke about it in documentaries, on radio, in my books, everywhere, because I believed in it. I knew it happened to me, and it was tangible. And then about 10 years ago, one of these documentaries, I think it was NBC's documentary, was playing in Israel. And I get an email the next day from an ex-Air Force officer who says to me, "Dear Mr. Geller, I saw that happening. I was walking to my parents' home on Rothschild Boulevard, and I saw a little boy in this huge garden on my right, and then suddenly this huge ball of fire appeared." And he also describes how I ran home, and this sphere exploded on our facade of the building and darkened it. And that's when I realized that he basically validated that happening. And I know now for sure that I was not imagining it. It happened.
I had no clue that it was just that recent that you got that validation. That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
It was just 10 years ago when one of these documentaries where I was telling this story played. So for me, it was such an important validation. I jumped on the email. I emailed him. I asked him for his name. His name is Abrahami. His kids are lawyers. It's on my website. In one of the documentaries, you actually see him being interviewed, and he tells a story, and you can see that he's very, very credible.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this fascinating, occurrence, encounter. And if you ask me now, Patrick, what was it? I don't know.
Well, I've seen both of those documentaries, and I really recommend that people check the website out and watch them because they're fascinating and a lot of things I didn't realize until I watched those.
Yes, my webmaster just added another documentary directed by Simon Cowell, and I urge you to watch that too, because it's one of the very rare documentaries that my mother, God bless her, who passed away, she actually talks about my powers when I was a small boy. But Patrick, I'm bringing all this up because I'm hugely controversial. I mean, you've read
Right.
the articles, you know how controversial I am.
Well, and speaking of controversial, I can't hold back from bringing the next topic up. We had already scheduled this interview, and suddenly news broke that the CIA just released 13 million pages of declassified documents, including records covering the testing that you were involved in 1973, I believe. It was known as the Stargate Project. Researchers wrote in those records that you, quote, demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner, unquote. Was it a surprise to you when these documents were released, or did you know they were coming? Were you aware of what was in the documents before this last week?
No, I wasn't aware, and I was very surprised. I knew that there is a major lawsuit against the CIA, But I never believed that a judge or, the lawsuit would make this happen. I was surprised, and I'll tell you why. I can only talk about myself. There are quite other, thousands, tens of thousands of documents. What surprised me is that I continued working for the CIA way after those experiments and testing. That's only the tip of the iceberg. Honestly, the tip of the iceberg, what they released. What I also urge you to watch is the secret CIA film that they filmed at SRI, Stanford Research Institute in Palo Alto. I got hold of that. That's on my website. It's half an hour of incredible experiments that I went through beside the telepathy, where I had to levitate a 1 gram weight. I had to locate water and metal ball bearings in metal cans. And the odds were, again, it sounds far out, but the odds were 1 billion to 1, 1 trillion to 1. And mind you, these are all under laboratory control conditions. No one can cheat or make magic tricks when you're locked in shielded rooms and Faraday cages, and drawings are done miles away. And then you can see in one of the documentaries a few CIA agents actually talk. There is a high officer in the CIA called Kit Green, and he basically says, I didn't believe that Uri could do things like that until I tested him myself. So he was sitting at Langley, Virginia, in the CIA headquarters, which is quite a long way from Palo Alto, California, as you all know. And he said to me, the scientists in Palo Alto with ties to the CIA told him Uri Geller can see things from a distance. And Kit Green said, no, he can't. This is all over the phone. And let me just remind you that there were no mobile phones there. There were no Twitters and Facebooks and FaceTimes. None of that existed. It was the infancy of computers, which we'll talk about in a moment, artificial intelligence. And the scientist, Hal Puthoff, I think it was, Dr. Hal Puthoff said, well, why don't you talk to Uri himself? And he handed me the telephone. I did not know that this was CIA Langley, Virginia. They told me he was just a colleague, a science man, and a scientist. And he said to me, well, Uri, can you tell me which book I'm holding? And he opens the book. He says, I opened to a page, and I had a piece of paper in front of me with a marker. And it took me a few minutes, but I started drawing a scrambled egg. And then the word architectural came in very strong, and I wrote on the drawing architectural. Now that freaked Kit Green out, freaked him out, because that's exactly what he wrote with his own pen on the page of Gray's Anatomy, because he was studying some kind of a virus that could infiltrate the mind. This is old CIA stuff. And that's when he said, okay, this is real. I'm going to release millions of dollars for psychical research. And that's how the remote viewing program was born.
Is in an article I read, it said that the experiments were meant to weaponize your abilities. Is that true?
Well, I realized that only when one certain secret agency, and I will not name which country, led me to a room in which stood a white pig, a big one. And the room had, I think, a table and a chair, to the best of my recollection. And the scientist turned to me and said, look, we're going to go out for lunch. We'll close the door. By the time we come back, we want to see the pig dead. They didn't say stop his heart. They said, we want to see the pig dead. Now, listen, Patrick, that shocked me. It catapulted me into fear. And I love animals, and I'm a vegetarian. I'm kind of, even I could call myself a vegan. And all my life I loved animals. I'm a dog lover, and I had dogs all my life. And just that request to kill a pig to stop its heart frightened me. And I realized then that a heart of a pig is very similar to a human's heart. And the target was basically Uri Andropov, who was the head of the KGB. And that, in a way, made me totally catapult or run out of scientific experiments. And but I had to continue some of my missions. They were all positive, like convincing the Russians to sign the Nuclear Arms Reduction Treaty. And that was all arranged with Senator Claiborne Pell, who was the head of the American Foreign Relations Committee, who came to brief me in London, with Ambassador Max Kempelman. And then they flew me to Geneva. Al Gore was there, head of the CIA was there. And I had to bombard Yuli Vorontsov, who was the head of the Russian arms reduction negotiator. So though there were very interesting tasks to spy on the Russian embassy outside Mexico or in Mexico City, erase floppy disks that KGB agents were flying out of Mexico, sit behind them in aeroplanes, mainly in Aeromexico, and I had to concentrate on their diplomatic pouches that were chained, handcuffed to the KGB's wrists, and I erased the Secret Service, so I erased the secret information on the floppy disks. And I knew that I was correct, and I was doing it because they kept asking to do it over and over and over.
I can't imagine how scary that would be, just to not exactly, I'm sure you didn't know completely what was going on in all of these agencies. And
well, you see, Patrick, that time I already realized what I was doing. Remember, when they took me out of Israel, they had probably made a deal with the Mossad to let me out. And since being a child, my dream was to become a Mossad agent, and I'll tell you how that happened. So for me, working as a spy was intriguing. I loved it. The skeptics were my cover. All the people who tried to debunk me, and all the skeptics had a whole frenzy around me. They actually created an inbuilt safety device around me and a great cover, because it was important for me to make the world's population, especially secret services and terrorists, to believe that I might really be just a magician and a trickster. It was very important. In many cases, I instigated the controversy. I would tell I had a manager called Yasha Katz. I told him, listen, come out with a story that Uri Geller is a fake. And he did, because my life was in danger in a few places. So my gosh, the stories don't end. That's why I told you that what you read in the CIA documents that were just released a few days ago is the tip of the iceberg. I know I'm talking too much, but I think that you find it interesting. When I was 12 years old, I lived in Cyprus with my mother, and we had a hotel which the Mossad, to those who don't know, is the Israeli Secret Service. It's the equivalent to the CIA. They turned our little hotel into a Mossad safe house. And I met a Mossad agent there, whose name was Yoav Shacham, whose key I bent, freaked him out. He told me, I don't know how you did it, but when you will be 18, join the paratroopers, go to officer school, and then find me. I'll get you into the Mossad. Then I became a Mossad agent when I was 14, because he would send me letters from Arabic countries with top secret information in them, and he instructed me to jump on my bicycle and cycle them to the Israeli consul and hand them personally into his own hands. Tragically, Yoav died in a raid in Israel. He was hit with a bullet in his head, and that shattered my dreams as a child of being a Mossad agent. And, I saw all the American spy movies and war films, and I was very much excited about that dark life.
How much of the testing and everything, aside from, we talked about the fear, but how much of it was fun? Like, were you just loving a lot of these moments?
No, I loved the missions. I hated the experiments. You see, what happens is when you're in a Faraday cage or underground where you're put next to artificial intelligence computers that are shielded from you, and you're asked to bombard them with your mind and erase them, then it's grueling because you're a guinea pig. You want to succeed, and you want to show your powers, and you want the scientists to be, to be excited about your own abilities. And it's just very, very tough, very hard, because it wasn't just one day. The telepathy tests were about 10 days, but then came all the other tests. And that's why I urge you to look at the CIA secret movie, which is on my website, and you come to your own conclusion, and you make up your own mind whether you believe that I'm a magician or what I do is real.
Well, in a New York Post article, I read that in 2013, you said that your career as a showbiz psychic was a front for your real life secret agent duties for the CIA. Can you explain that? So was that
Yes.
on purpose so that people didn't draw attention to the experiments or in the CIA stuff?
Absolutely. But my show business life was real. I still bent spoons and I read minds, and I did find oil for huge mining companies. I'm just showing off now, but I found Mexico.
That's why I called you.
You're very lucky, Patrick, that these documents just came out. You are the first one, exclusive. You've got, actually, you almost have a scoop, because I haven't been interviewed about these secret documents in such a manner, such a long interview. Mm-hmm. So I urge you to put it up on your podcast as soon as possible before
I will.
Others interview me. But my shows went on, my lectures, my oil finding. The president of Mexico was so impressed that I found oil for Pemex, which is a national oil company, that he made me a Mexican citizen. I actually have a Mexican passport, and it's number 1, because no one ever got a Mexican passport. You have to be born in Mexico. And I continued these shows, the show business side, but they were a cover. They were a cover, and the controversy was even better, because that was the safety device. I needed people also not to believe in me. I mean, Patrick, you're a grown-up, intelligent man. Just think, if a terrorist organization, especially extremists, if they believe that I can trigger a nuclear bomb, or because that's another experiment they tried to do with me. They took me to the Lawrence Livermore Radiation Labs. That's where they build nuclear weapons. And one of the tests was whether I could actually trigger a bomb. And then unbelievable things happened there. And there is a very famous author called Annie Jacobson. She's in Los Angeles, who's a Pulitzer nominated author. She's coming out with a book called Phenomenon in March. You must read that book, and you should interview her, because she took 2 or 3 years of her life to research this. But in that facility where they build nuclear weapons, some incredible things happen to the scientists. I don't want to go into it. From there, I was taken to the American Naval Surface Weapons Center in Maryland. They wanted to see how my mind can affect a new alloy they created. Now, this is only in America, but then there were at least 3 or 4 other secret agencies in other countries that tested me and gave me missions to do. Ideologically, they were, I'm an Israeli, so I knew that at the end of the day, it's all good for Israel, it's good for world peace, and I agreed to do them. I was never paid, and some of the results are still being felt worldwide.
As long as we, stay humane and, like you talked about the fear and killing the pigs and stuff like that, but we don't fund big, massive scientific research about this stuff really anymore. Not like we did then, if I am understanding correctly. Should we be doing more research in this area currently?
Okay, let me then correct you, Patrick. You are wrong.
Okay.
paranormal and psychic research remote viewing went deep black. Basically, the government doesn't want controversy. They don't want to see a story in the New York Times or the Washington Post. As a matter of fact, the Washington Post came out yesterday or before yesterday with this huge article about me. There wasn't a word of negativity in it. They basically reported what the CIA did. But paranormal research, not research, but active remote viewers are working nonstop, day in, day out. And not only for American Defense Department and CIA, but other agencies. And I'll tell you why. Beside terrorism, that we've got terrorists murdering people every week somewhere around the world, we are most concerned about terrorists putting their hands on nuclear weapons. And I'm not speaking here about a terrorist organization stealing a missile, which is not easy to do. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about is terrorist organizations, extremists, putting their hands on know-how, how to build a nuclear bomb in a suitcase. Just imagine the tragedy that could occur if a nuclear weapon explodes in a suitcase, and a small one, a small megaton atomic bomb, downtown LA or New York or Milan or Paris or London. You know, it's the World Trade Center was hugely tragical, but here we're talking about nuclear. So we're talking about 250 to 400,000 dead. We're talking about miles of areas that you won't be able to walk into because of radiation. We are talking about more mileage in circumstance, in radius of radioactivity. It's shocking. Listen, what I'm telling you now, this is not mumbo jumbo. If you get on any Google search and you'll just put in, how can I build a nuclear weapon in a suitcase, things are going to come up. So we're not talking about science fiction here. We're talking about a very dangerous reality. Mm-hmm. That's why NSA are listening to my conversation now. No doubt they're listening because it's my phone. Definitely your phones and many, many millions of people's phones are being recorded. All emails are being read. SMS, WhatsApps are being seen by national security agencies, and each country is spying on on another country. Espionage, hackings, into even artificial intelligence is going on because, Patrick, everything today is computerized, whether it's your electrical grid, water systems, nuclear weapons, F-35s, everything is based on computerization. And that's it. And that is why we have to be very, very alert. And I think the CIA are doing a great job. NSA are doing a great job. You will never hear me say anything negative about any of these intelligence agencies.
Man, is there anything else what else do you want to tell us about these documents that were just released? Is there anything, that I should be asking you?
Well, that at one stage I was taken, we all watched Donald Trump being inaugurated. And by the way, I don't know if you saw my Facebook, but
yes, you predicted it.
Yeah, in September, I had the guts to put up a very short sentence, whether you like him or not. Donald Trump is going to be the 45th president of the United States. And of course, he is. And at one stage, when we all watched the inauguration with the Capitol building behind him, remember that from yesterday? Very few people know this, and this is not a secret, otherwise I wouldn't be telling you this, but in the Capitol building dome, that the big dome of the Capitol building, mm-hmm. There's actually a shielded room. There is a room where top generals and CIA agents and national security people can all sit around the table and talk without them being listened to by Russians or by any other country. And I was taken into that room, and I had a lecture to some of the I don't know, national security people and CIA. I didn't know who was in front of me, but I'm just assuming they were important individuals. And then I met quite a few senators in a private party. I was asked by the FBI to use my mind to influence Russian diplomats to defect to the West. Also, at one stage, I did something for the FBI. There was a serial killer in New York called David Berkowitz. He called himself the son of Sam, and I actually found him. I pointed on a map to the FBI where he was. He was in Yonkers, New York, and they caught him.
Is that common knowledge? That's crazy.
Not really. But you can't hide anything today, Patrick, because there is God Google. And if you do search, you will find maybe not the story itself, but ties to the story. And if you look at all the documentaries that I'm urging you to look at on my website, which is www.urigeller.com, you will find these agents, like the one that asked me to look for the serial killer, son of Sam. These are agents working for the government, and they're not going to lie. So when you hear them talk and when you see the evidence, you've got to say, well, this is really unbelievable. This is not magic. This is not trickery. But to all the skeptics, I have to send thousands of bouquets of flowers because they did a lot of good to my career.
Many of the psychics and mediums I talk to will tell me that it's okay to be skeptic, and some go out of their way to even say it's important to be a little skeptical when it comes to paranormal phenomenon anyway. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Very, very much so. Although and this is my opinion, I view skeptics as insignificant. To me, they're a tiny molecular nothing. Because if you look at the bigger picture, Patrick, just imagine, skeptics are usually atheists. And again, this is my opinion. And how many atheists are there in the world? Look at the masses. 7.5 billion people live on Earth. Maybe more, maybe a little less. I didn't look at the latest figures. But out of the 7.5 billion, I would say that 7.49999 are believers, and they believe in God. They're religious people. We believe in God. And under God, there are infinite spaces. So, in my opinion, everything and anything is possible if there is infinity. And I just have to look at it scientifically also and go back to 1924 when a very clever man, a scientist, came up with an incredibly powerful scientific quote. And he said, look at this, E equals mc square. What an equation. What an amazing, what an amazing equation. What that meant is, first of all, it was, of course, Albert Einstein, if you remember this from school. Mm-hmm. But Albert Einstein, with that quote, proved that everything in the universe is made from energy, Patrick. I'm energy, you're energy, the telephone I'm holding is energy. Listen to me tap the table now. It sounds to you solid, doesn't it? But the table is not solid. It's energy. It's vibrating in a certain frequency that to us looks and feels solid, but it's not. So one must ask then, hey, hold on, if energy is made from everything and everything is made from energy, also energy cannot be destroyed. That's another fact that Albert Einstein proved scientifically. So you must ask the question, and I'm talking now to atheists, what happens to you when you die? If your energy and your soul is probably energy, and your spirit is energy, and you survive because energy cannot be destroyed, one must ask the question, well, hang on, where do we go? And this is why I'm a huge believer in life after death.
Is it true your mother sends you messages from the other side?
Yes, I believe that I got a few messages from my mother. Absolutely. In one of the documentaries, my mother always appears by sending a bird. Most of them are pigeons, doves, And in one of the documentaries, I take the crew up to where I was born, to the little tiny apartment I grew up, where the first spoon bent in my hand in Bezalel Yaffa 13. And as I was finishing my last sentence, a pigeon flies in forcefully. I don't know how, because the balcony was kind of barricaded with a mesh, and the bird came flying into the room where I and my mother, spent years and years. So yes, I am a huge believer, and I do look. I can't validate every medium, Patrick. Mm-hmm. I don't know who are the real ones, who are charlatans, but I think that there is another side. There is the other side, whether it's heaven or paradise. I don't know what to call it, but no doubt we go somewhere.
When did James Randi first come into your life, speaking of skeptics?
He probably appeared in the very early 70s, where he tried to debunk the SRI experiments by working together somehow with Time magazine. He claims that he also came to one of my shows, and I met him in the dressing room. It's very hard for me to go back almost 50 years, you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But he was, I must say that from all the skeptics, he was, and unfortunately stopped talking about me for some reason, but he was my best publicist. He's the one that I have to really send 1,000 bouquets of flowers to, because he kept the burning fire under the myth of Uri Geller, and he stirred the controversy, and he did all the talking and all the television shows, and it's amazing. You see, already in Israel I was controversial, by the way, without a Randi around. And every time there was a negative story in Israel in the 1968, 1969, I thought that I was destroyed. But that night when I had a show, I didn't understand how come all the tickets sold out and 500 people were left standing outside without tickets. And I will just conclude the controversial part about my life by bringing up Donald Trump. Look, Patrick, and all of us listening to this, you all followed his campaign and Hillary's campaign. I mean, the things that Donald Trump was called during the last year and a half were so devastating, were so ugly. I don't want to mention the names, because he was called everything from a con man to a fraud to a liar. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And guess who was elected yesterday? Mm-hmm. Of course, Donald Trump. That shows you that no matter what controversy, no matter what they say about you, as long as they spell your name correctly, that's going to be good for you. In the mid-70s, I stopped reading about me. You know what I did? I had a little tape measure in my pocket. And every time there was a big story, I pulled out the tape measure, I measured the page, and I said, wow, that's not bad. Thank you very much. And Oscar Wilde said something very clever 100 years ago. He said, there is only one thing in life worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about.
How many times have you met James Randi, and you don't have like the secret friendship with him, do you?
No, I met him 3 times or 4 times, but the last time I wanted to make peace with him. I offered my hand. It was I think it was outside the Trump Tower where David Blaine buried himself. Mm-hmm. And I was in New York. I think David Blaine asked me to come. And there I see Randi with a kind of very strange and interesting coat on him. He looked like a monk. And I told my brother-in-law, Shippy, who was actually filming the event with David Blaine, I said, Shippy, let's walk over to James and let's put, I'll shake his hand and say, Randi, let's forget everything. Let's put everything behind us. And I walked over to him, stretched my hand. My brother-in-law was filming this. And I said, James, here is my hand. Let's shake hands. Let's just forget everything that happened between us. And he wouldn't take my hand. And I said, James, why Randy, why aren't you shaking my hand? And he kind of looked around over his shoulders, and he said to me with these words, if I remember them correctly, he says, "Because I hate your guts."
Oh my gosh.
So how sad is that? And that's when I realized, poor man, But having said that, there was a movie out about him recently, and the directors asked me whether I would be interviewed, and I said, sure, why not? So I'm actually, I agreed to be interviewed. Hey, I'm a peace-loving guy. I have no animosity towards anyone. I don't hate anyone. I'm nice to everyone. I try to help people, and every email I get, I answer, and that's me.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a really selfish, super nerdy question now, and that is, what was it like being friends? You were friends with many, many important and famous people, but what was it like being friends with Michael Jackson?
Well, Michael, when he was 14, came to one of my shows. I was performing at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. When I finished my show, one of the ushers comes up to me and she says, "Mr. Geller, did you know that Michael Jackson was sitting right there?" And I said, "What? Do you mean the Michael Jackson?" And she said, yes, he was in a disguise. And so, I ran out to the lobby. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but it was gone. Decades later, I was together in the house of Mohammed Al-Fayed, whose son died with Princess Diana in Paris. And Michael called him out of the blue. And Mohammed says to Michael, Uri Geller is sitting next to me. And I heard Michael shout out, "Uri Geller." So he handed me the phone, and that's when our friendship began. I flew to New York. I had a lecture in New York, met him there. We became really close. I warned him many times that, he's going to die if he continues what he was doing with sleeping aids and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I very few people know this, but I designed his last album. If you open the booklet of Invincible, which is the title of his last CD,
mm-hmm.
you will find my drawings in there and what he says about me in there. And it's a very sad story, but he was also my best man when I renewed my wedding vows.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
He was an amazing man. He was a phenomenon. He was an icon. Mm-hmm. He was a legend. He's sitting there, up there in heaven with with John Lennon and Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra, and they're having fun, of course. He's still around. His music is incredible, and there will be only one Michael Jackson.
I had no idea when he passed how much I would be, broken and moved in that moment, and I just realized how big of a part of my life he played.
Well, Patrick, what I would like you to do is, on my website, I think it's under documentaries, he once asked me to do a film about him, and he allowed me to film him. The documentary is called, I think, My Friend Michael Jackson. It was on ITV, the biggest channel in England, and I think in another 50 countries. Do watch that, because I filmed him with a small Sony camera. I wanted to show his fans, and it's really from the perspective of his fans. He was so amazing with his fans. He loved them to bits. I'll never forget the day we were in the limo together, and a girl from Germany clinged to the window of the limousine, and the driver drove on her feet with a car, and that's a heavy car, a limo. Mm-hmm. And she screamed, "Ow, ow!" And Michael rolled down the window, and he says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she said, yes, I'm okay. I'm okay. Do you know what? She didn't even feel pain, probably. It's incredible what Michael did to his fans. Unbelievable. I remember one day in a hotel, they used to bring him first of all, hundreds and hundreds of fans gathered outside in every country outside his hotel. And they would bring him letters and teddy bears and food and paintings and greeting cards, you name it. And he would take them all. And the day he would leave the hotel, I witnessed this myself. He went through every drawer, every nook and cranny. He lifted up carpets just to make sure that he hasn't left anything that his fans brought him. Even if it was a scribbled piece of paper, "I love you, Michael." I'll never forget that. He pulled it out it was under the carpet, and he kind of folded it away and put it in a pocket next to his heart. He didn't know who wrote it. Somebody just put it in his hand. So he loved them. And very, very sad the way he died.
Thank you for that. How can we achieve peace on the planet? Probably the last question here, maybe the most important.
Well, Patrick, there is so much terror going on around the world. As we speak, there are people killing each other in the name of religion, that it will be a very difficult task. But I think that if presidents and prime ministers and positive people like you and your listeners, if we think and we activate that law of attraction in our minds and we pray and we believe, I think that it is possible. I always believe that Donald Trump will be a good person to lead a country, and he said that he will come hopefully here to the Middle East, and maybe he can make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That would be a great beginning. I do believe I'm a positive person. I'm an optimistic person. I believe in life. I believe in God. I believe in humanity, and we have to preserve our planet. Otherwise, forget it. We will be destroyed. But let's think positive, and I want to thank you, Patrick, for calling me up. I want to thank all your listeners who listened in to hear this podcast. You're a great personality. You're a good interviewer, and anytime I can help you, just let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words. And, I'm going to get this out as soon as I can.
Do that quickly, because I'm lined up to do some more big American radio shows about the CIA papers. So don't delay.
I won't. I appreciate it so much. Thank you very, very kindly. And you have a great evening.
Okay. Love you all. And Patrick, stay on the line and just close the machine. I want to ask you something personal.
Okay, I will. So thank you. And he did. He took the time to have a very nice and personal conversation with me off the record. What an opportunity and amazing energy. And I cannot believe that I considered not interviewing him. Thank you, Uri Geller.
You're listening to the Big Seance Podcast with Patrick Keller. Look for us on iTunes and be sure to check out BigSeance.com for more discussion.
Welcome to Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil. I've got 4 ghost reports this time. I've never done 4 before. They're all very short, though. And rather than tell you what they're about, I'm going to just go ahead and read them, and I think you'll see the connection between all 4 of them. The first one was published in the Rock Island Argus from Illinois on June 8th of 1894. The headline is, "Haunted by a Ghost. An Army deserter accuses himself of the crime of murder." Galesburg, Illinois, June 8th. Police authorities are exercised over a letter received in which the writer Robert Isdale, now in the Fort Leavenworth military prison for desertion from the Army, accuses himself of murder. A year ago, last March, a young man named Minifer was found dead in the Union Hotel in this city, and the coroner's jury returned a verdict of death by asphyxiation, and there seemed to be no suspicious circumstances. Isdale, however, in his letter says that when Minifer asked him to get a glass of liquor, he mixed with it a quantity of morphine, intending to put Minifer to sleep and then take his money. The drink, however, killed Minifer, and Isdale, who was a porter in the hotel, left town. He now says that Minifer's ghost haunts him all the time and asks that at the expiration of his time at Fort Leavenworth, he be brought back here and punished. The next article is from the Seattle Star from Washington, published on November 23rd of 1911. The headline is, Haunted by Ghost, Man Admits Guilt. Danville, Illinois, November 23rd. Haunted by the ghost of the man whom the police say he threw down a flight of steps in Belleville, Illinois, 3 years ago and killed, Frank Baker, arrested here under the name of Fred Arlington, has confessed that he was wanted in Belleville for the crime and said that it was the terror of the dead man's ghost that forced him to give himself up. And another one from the Tacoma Times on August 19th of 1913, Haunted by Ghost of Man He Killed. Frankfort, Kentucky, August 19th. An old man who said he was George Borgman of New York City surrendered to Warden Wells of the Kentucky Penitentiary, stating that he had escaped 21 years ago. He declared that he had been haunted by the ghost of his brother-in-law, whom he murdered 32 years ago in Covington, Kentucky, for ill-treating his sister. And the last one appeared in the Norwich Bulletin, a newspaper from Connecticut, on January 3rd of 1916. Angelo Dominic walked into the North End Police Station, Boston, and told the officer in charge that the ghost of his murdered father-in-law, Mike Nemo, of Lucenshire, Pennsylvania, had told him to give himself up for the crime. If you've ever wandered around my website, The Merry Ghost Hunter, you might have come across a character named Vera Van Slyke. She's my favorite ghost hunter. And in her world, guilt and ghosts go hand in hand. In fact, it's strong feelings of guilt that rupture the membrane between the supernatural world and our own, and that's how ghosts cross the border. I think that these articles are very much in keeping with that idea. Guilt is a ghost. You've been listening to Spectral Edition. I'm Tim Prasil. I have close to 300 of these ghost articles. I post one each Wednesday on my website, The Merry Ghost Hunter. That's MERRY Ghost Hunter. I hope you stop by.
Thanks for joining us for the Big Seance podcast. We'd better get back to the table while there's still some candlelight left.
So before I leave you today, here's some listener feedback. I don't often read YouTube comments in my episodes, but I thought this one that came in was very nice. Annabelle T. chimed in on the YouTube page and said, I found the Big Seance podcast in 2016 and have become a true fan. Your pouring a cup of tea is the best opening. I look forward to cuddling up with my blanket and my favorite tea, spending time enjoying your programs. I wish you many 2017 blessings. In iTunes, Bink Joe wrote, I love this podcast so much, and I especially love Patrick, the host. I have been afraid my whole life of Ouija anything, and I feel like this podcast has really opened my eyes to the beauty behind it. Along with all of the other things discussed, thank you, Patrick, for putting the beauty and awesome in being a paranerd. It's awesome to feel such a kinship with you and the people you have on. I love you guys, and I love what I do, and I'd really love it if you shared this episode with others. You rock. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit BigSeance.com. Just click on the Big Seance podcast logo or find it in the menu. You can also find and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, and iHeartRadio. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to BigSeance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to BigSeance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again
next time.